U.S. is tracking a big drop in tourism from around the world.
From flight reservations to resorts and restaurants, the travel industry has gone from predicting a record-breaking 2025.
Stunning images of near-empty passenger planes are popping up on social media. These international flights have many tourists flying to the USA.
Welcome to Los Angeles, not Hollywood, but the dark side of LA. Here in the heart of America's wealthiest city, thousands of homeless people live in garbage, a clear sign of social crisis. American tourism is collapsing, but no one wants to talk about the real reason. Not plane tickets, not visas, but because tourists are walking into a living nightmare. In this video, you will see the naked truth about the American tourism disaster, where the dream of freedom is rotting from the inside. Number 1. The dark side of American-style tourism. Los Angeles is not the first city to face an urban crisis. But in 2025, what is different is the speed and depth of the discontent. Once a symbol of the American dream, the city is on the global tourist map, not only because of iconic landmarks like Hollywood and Santa Monica, but also because of the growing confusion of international visitors when faced with an unexpected urban reality. According to a report from the American Hotel and Lodging Association, 47% of international travelers surveyed in 2024 cited issues related to public spaces as a reason for not choosing cities like Los Angeles. More specifically, in districts like Venice and downtown, average hotel revenue fell 14% in the first quarter of 2025 compared to the same period in 2019. One of the main reasons identified was a persistent sense of insecurity stemming from the frequent presence of tense and uncontrolled behavior in areas that were originally zoned for tourism and commercial purposes. In a context where tourism is becoming a choice based on social feeling rather than simply geography, can a city with a sharply contrasting promotional image and reality still maintain its lasting appeal? Notably, the number of European tourists decreased by nearly 11% over the past year, according to statistics from the U.S. Travel Association. And this is a group that tends to spend long-term choosing cultural destinations such as downtown Echo Park or Silver Lake, places that are currently facing a conflict between community space and the housing crisis. Not every city can play both a destination and a place of crisis that has lasted for decades. When those two roles overlap and are not clearly resolved, Los Angeles finds itself in a pincer movement, no longer a model, but also unable to rebuild. Number 2. Urban Asymmetric Center. Less than a mile from concert halls, museums, and the financial heart of the city lies an area with the highest concentration of homeless people in America. The central slum, which covers about 0.4 square miles, has become the most visible image of the disconnect between two worlds living in the same city. It is no longer an outlier, it is the de facto center of a crisis that has lasted more than 4 decades. The dense presence of tense carts and improvised survival devices, combined with inadequate sanitation, makes the area a constant challenge for any tourism development plan. With an estimated 4,400 people living permanently in the area by the end of 2024, the central slum is not only a social phenomenon, but also an accurate measure of urban governance capacity. 20th century planning coupled with policies focused on crisis locating have turned the area into a containment zone rather than a transition zone. International visitors don't need a map to recognize the area. The smell of disinfectant, the sirens of ambulances, and the police checkpoints are enough to make an impression upon entering. Meanwhile, locals have had to adjust their paths, routes, and even hours of life to avoid direct contact with the area. This has had a direct impact on tourism services. Sightseeing bus routes are cutting stops near downtown, while businesses that offer walking tours in the nearby art district have reported an 18% increase in cancellations over the past 2 years. By mid-2024, visitor numbers to museums around the central slums had dropped by 12.7% compared to the same period in 2019, despite extensive free art programs. This shows that the effect of temporary beautification measures is not enough to offset the impact of a prolonged housing crisis. Is the constant presence of emergency in public spaces changing the way a city is perceived from the outside? Do visitors walking through these streets still see culture, or only signs of exhaustion? The central slum alone does not account for all the problems, but it is this area that most clearly exposes the gap between theory and practice. Any reconstruction plan that does not take this as a central focus of analysis will have difficulty achieving practical results. Tourism is not just built on destinations, but also on a sense of urban order. When a central point is removed from the experience map, the disruption spreads to the surrounding service ecosystem. The central slum has gone beyond the boundaries of a neighborhood. It is a warning sign for the entire urban management model in a reshaping global tourism environment. Number 3. Inevitable parameters. The picture of Los Angeles tourism is no longer in the posters, but in the data. International arrivals to Los Angeles were down 11.3% year over year through the first quarter of 2025. This figure does not reflect a single accident, but rather the cumulative effect of successive tourism cycles driven by a single factor, a change in the perception of public space. According to statistics from accommodation systems in the downtown and coastal areas, the cancellation rate for short-term stays has increased by 16.5% over the past 2 years, especially in areas with high density of tent camps. Online booking platforms have recorded a 28% increase in the priority of searches for keywords such as far from homeless camps or near quiet residential areas. This is not a trend due to seasonality or pricing policy. It clearly shows a shift in customer expectations. Revenue from intracity travel is expected to decline 19.8% by 2024, leading to a decline in tourism employment in Los Angeles County, the equivalent of nearly 7,200 jobs lost, while the number of visitors diverted to alternative cities like San Diego or Austin is expected to increase by double digits. At the national level, the cost of the drop in international tourism is estimated at $12.5 billion, but if we separate the impact from California, the direct cost to Los Angeles accounts for more than 22% of the state's total. That's especially significant given that LA is California's largest international tourism hub. It is worth noting that some direct routes from Western Europe and East Asia have been withdrawn not due to capacity, but because demand does not guarantee a minimum occupancy rate. Airports that were once the primary gateways to Los Angeles, such as Heathrow Haneda or Vancouver, have now shifted their focus to other destinations with a higher degree of stability. This situation raises a question that appears at many tourism industry meetings. Can tourism promotion campaigns have an impact when the actual perception of visitors is inconsistent with the promoted image? More specifically, the level of influence of a city lies not only in the value of its tourism products, but also in its ability to create a social context that is safe and trustworthy enough. When a destination loses its core experience, guarantee the economics don't work the way they should. Los Angeles is entering a phase where the cost of repairing its image will be many times higher than the cost of maintaining it in the first place. And the data has long said so. Number 4. Unlimited crisis. The impact of homelessness in Los Angeles extends beyond the decline in international visitors or financial indicators in the service sector. It is spreading to the very fabric of the city, breaking down the boundaries that were once thought to separate between social policy and economic strategy, between legality and sense of community, between urban function and place identity. In areas with high concentrations of homeless residents, emergency medical service calls increased by 23% over 2 years. Hotspots such as downtown or West Venice saw average response times increase by 3 to 4 minutes due to limited mobility due to sidewalk encroachment. For an already overburdened health system, such delays not only reduce response efficiency, but also directly impact residents' confidence in the city's ability to manage. Schools and educational institutions in border areas have also begun to adjust their extracurricular schedules, limiting students' direct contact with areas showing signs of unrest. Some schools have adjusted pickup and drop-off times to avoid rush hour on routes where temporary camps are frequently present. As learning has to revolve around non-curricular factors, the ability to provide a standardized educational environment is gradually being stretched. Even transportation and infrastructure planning, which are less linked to social policy, have been forced to adjust. Roadside parking and sewer maintenance is difficult in areas with unstable populations, leading to average maintenance costs increasing by 14% compared to unaffected areas. Amid this, a concept once used in developing cities has resurfaced in Los Angeles: indirect management costs. These are the sum of lost time manpower system reliability and opportunity costs due to social disruptions that go unaddressed. In this context, a city's ability to maintain its tourist appeal is only the tip of the iceberg. The question that needs to be asked now is when the city's management apparatus is focused on dealing with the domestic crisis. Where is the place for strategies to revive the hospitality industry? The essence of a destination cannot be separated from its ability to organize daily life. And Los Angeles is demonstrating that in the clearest way. On number 5, faces no longer ignored. One of the common misconceptions about homelessness is that it is a monolithic phenomenon, as if everyone living on the margins has the same story, the same causes, the same circumstances. In fact, the census records at least 17 distinct status groups within the homeless population in Los Angeles, from workers who have lost their homes due to rising costs of living, to individuals who have been excluded from the labor market due to mental health issues, to those newly affected by economic upheaval, to those living on the margins for years without access to public assistance. By the end of 2024, more than 48% of people without a permanent residence in Los Angeles County had held a full-time job in the previous 3 years, suggesting that the line between homeless and homeless is increasingly thin. A single financial event, a job loss, a rent increase, or a medical bill can be enough to push an individual out of the system. More than 31% of these people had no criminal record, no serious criminal record, and no previous use of welfare services, suggesting that this is not the inevitable result of deviant living, as many previously assumed. Notably, nearly 38,000 veterans nationwide are homeless, with more than 12% living in California. Despite receiving preferential treatment in housing and health care, actual access rates are far below the goals set by support programs. Also, among this group, the rate of diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder is 3 times higher than the population average, making long-term stability difficult. At the system level, more than 54% of homeless people in Los Angeles reported that they had applied for public assistance but were blocked from the process or denied because they did not have a permanent address. Thousands of people are excluded from housing programs each year because they cannot complete their applications due to lost documents, phones, or other means of communication. Access to the support system becomes impossible when the system requires conditions that the person seeking help cannot meet. Can a city base its policy on averages when it is the diversity of causes that shapes the whole phenomenon? If we only see the masses and not the internal structures, any intervention strategy risks being misguided. And if the misalignment persists long enough, the cost will be not only in budgets, but also in a decline in public perception of urban justice. Number 6. Reaction from the machinery and the market. The city of Los Angeles has implemented a series of interventions since late 2022 to mitigate the impact of the housing crisis on public spaces and the urban economy. One of the central programs is Inside Safe, an initiative that places homeless people in commercial shelters. By the end of 2024, the program had reached more than 21,000 cases. However, data from the Los Angeles Department of Homeless Services shows that the rate of return to homelessness after 6 months hovers at 43%, clearly reflecting the temporary nature of the policy. In addition, the city has expanded its public space cleanup campaigns in key tourist areas. On average, 40 to 70 gathering spots are cleared each month, but nearly 60% of them re-emerge in less than 30 days. Clearances without long-term support often result in the displacement of affected residents to neighboring areas rather than ending their street-dwelling status. Businesses in the hospitality industry are responding in their own ways. Hotel chains in Hollywood and Venice are starting to incorporate safe locations into their marketing strategies. Rental platforms are seeing an uptick in requests from guests for information about their surroundings, especially proximity to tent camps. Some landlords in the Westlake and Mid-Wilshire districts are even adding security maps and demographic data to their property descriptions. On the other hand, the urban services market is also adjusting to the changes. Insurance costs for businesses located near streets that are regularly cleared will increase by 12% in 2024. Inner-city tourist transport companies are adjusting their routes to avoid risky areas facing negative reactions from customers. The adaptation is taking place quietly but systematically. Making one thing clear, the market itself no longer sees this as a temporary crisis. Number 7. Urban images in the period of redefining tourism. Los Angeles was once positioned as a visual representation of the global dream majestic boulevards, long beaches, iconic mountainside billboards. In the current context, however, the image is increasingly identified not with cultural icons, but with signs of social disintegration occurring in public spaces. This imbalance not only creates an aesthetic crisis, but also causes the city to lose its consistent identity. A fundamental element in the psychology of tourist behavior. An internal survey conducted in late 2024 of travelers who had booked a trip to Los Angeles but then changed their mind found that more than 42% of cancellations were directly related to the sense of unease created by visual imagery tents, clutter-stressed faces, and uncontrolled living environments. Not the price, not the distance, but the image. The widespread impact of this phenomenon has forced many visual content productions to change their approach. Destination campaigns in recent years have significantly cut back on panoramic street shots, favoring isolated spaces, luxury hotels, gated resorts, and closed-off locations. The use of imagery from suburban or socially isolated areas has increased by more than 60% in digital marketing content for online travel platforms. When a city can no longer present its core without removing the physical, it signals a threshold for the separation between visual and social space. Is it possible to sustain a hospitality industry in a context where the hospitality no longer represents itself? A city is not just a place of roads and services. It is also a collection of symbols, reflections, and expectations. Once those expectations are eroded by the repeated images of failure, the belief in the value of the destination is also withdrawn. The symbols that were once strengths in this period become the reflective surfaces of a crisis that has no end in sight. Number 8. Gap between promotion and reality. The tourism ecosystem of Los Angeles is based on a value chain that intertwines entertainment, real estate media, and international events. Hosting iconic events such as the Olympic Super Bowl or film festival not only attracts visitors, but also serves to reaffirm the image. However, in the current period, the gap between expectations and implementation conditions is increasingly evident. The city aims to invest more than $3 billion in infrastructure for the 2028 Olympics, including expanding public transportation, renovating the downtown area, and creating temporary housing. That's in addition to a series of plans to reallocate public space and use technology to monitor security. But outside of the plan, the growth of the homeless population shows no signs of slowing down. It's up more than 18% in the past year alone. Another consequence is the temporary relocation of media and content production away from the CBD. The rate of commercial filming moving to the suburbs will increase by more than 25% from 2023 to 2025. Some studios are cutting back on their mid-city plans and moving to other states altogether. As the entire imaging industry, the backbone of tourism, experience design is forced to restructure its operations, the ripple effect on the entire hospitality industry is inevitable. The question is not whether to host an event. The real question is whether a city can use an event to cover a social fabric that is under chronic stress. The surface can be renewed, but public perception, especially from international visitors, is not built on temporary details. Once the confidence factor drops, the domino effect will spread to areas that were not included in the forecast. Number 9. The threshold of urban consent. Any model of city governance relies on a minimum level of social consensus. When basic living conditions are disrupted for a long time, public spaces are unsanitary, security is fragmented, and public services are forced to operate in a constant emergency environment that consensus begins to erode. In some districts, data from the population management system shows that the rate of movement of middle-income households is expected to increase by 8.4% in 2024, exceeding the average of the past 5 years. This group of people is considered a pillar of stability for the city budget through consumption taxes and service contributions. As this group begins to leave the central area, the ability to balance the cost of maintaining the system with the actual standard of living becomes more difficult to predict. The question that needs to be asked is, where does the tolerance of urban residents come from? From cultural traditions, from faith in reform, or simply because they have no other options? When only the last option is left, social cracks will not be loud, but will be quiet and persistent, irreversible with budgets or media campaigns. AAAAAAA 10. Urban order cannot be rebuilt with mortar. Los Angeles hasn't lost its tourist status because of a lack of landmarks or infrastructure. The bridges, boulevards, beaches, and museums are still there. What's driving the city into crisis is the growing gap between the projected image and the experienced reality. The Los Angeles problem is not limited to tourism. It is a clear manifestation of the overload of modern urban structures in the face of unresolved social problems. The decline in international visitors is only the end result, not the initial cause. Choosing to open an international corridor is not just an economic decision. It is a commitment that the city can accommodate people from elsewhere without hiding what goes on inside. When a city no longer inspires trust its position on the world, tourism map will soon be questioned. If you find what's happening in Los Angeles a story worth taking a closer look at, please share this video with someone interested in cities' public policy and tourism ecosystems in a changing global context. You can also leave a comment below to expand the conversation. Every opinion helps this story not be confined to numbers. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the NVL Travel Documentary channel to continue following honest analysis, clear data, and in-depth perspectives on cities that are changing under the pressure of the times. Thank you for accompanying until the end.